You can't hate yourself into someone that you love. The funny thing about this is, most of us probably know that here in our heads, right? But when it comes to living it as an embodiment and showing up as that for ourselves on a consistent basis, it's fucking tough, right? It's tough to be loving and to be gentle with ourselves when we feel like we fucked up or we've fallen short of the mark. We lean towards being probably more understanding towards other people when they make mistakes, but when it comes to ourselves, we're so harsh. We are absolutely our worst critics. But it never, ever in the history of everdom has ever pointed a finger towards the type of self-love, compassion, and grace that has us feel in love with and truly at peace with our own mind and body. And that's exactly what we're going to be exploring today in this podcast, is how we can cultivate the type of self-love that feels good as fuck. And it comes from learning how to recognize when we are being hard on ourselves. I know you're going to love this conversation. I cannot wait for you to check it out and see what comes through for you as you listen in. Big love.
Let's start by meeting at the bottom of the breath, exhaling all the air from the lungs. Taking a deep inhale through the nose. Holding at the top and letting it go through the mouth. Beautiful. Another deep belly inhale through the nose. Holding at the top and gently sighing it out. Deepest breath you've taken all day today, breathing it in. Holding at the top. Sipping a little bit more air. And letting it go. Allowing the breath to return to our normal rhythm. As we drop into gratitude for this opportunity to connect, to share, to express, to bring wisdom out of the darkness and into the light. God, Spirit, Universe, we ask that we be clear channels and vessels, hollow bones, for the wisdom that wants to come through today to be shared. We ask for those on the listening and receiving end to have open hearts to be able to receive this transmission, to receive this medicine. God, we thank you for this opportunity to grow, to evolve, to expand, to heal, and to thrive. And taking a moment just to share a prayer for the planet and for the forests that are burning, and for the animals and the humans that are suffering. May this conversation and may this prayer play a small part in healing the planet and healing humanity. And coming back into our bodies, coming back into this conversation. And Wolf, I am grateful to be here.
All right, let's breathe that one in one more time. Why don't we? It is time. It's time to get weird. It's time to play. It's time to let the medicine flow today.
Let's have some fun.
Josh, let's have some fun. Josh, my friend, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the conversation. This has been a long time coming, but we're in the cut. And it is time to see what comes through. So thanks for being here, man.
Thank you, brother. It's such an honor. You have been a human that I have looked to over the past few years since we've met as just a pillar of integrity and and love and play and embodiment. So thank you for doing what you do. And it's just an honor to be here, brother.
Yeah, you speaking to it. We've only known each other a couple of years at this point, and it was out of the blue. It was the byproduct of an ice bath, actually, and is now blossomed into this beautiful relationship where not only have we been witnessing each other's journeys, healing, growing, expanding, both personally, relationally, and from a business standpoint, but also, we just completed the trauma informed somatic leadership and breathwork container together, and that's yet another core that has us connected. And the more and more that we've spoken, it's become clear to me how similar
Mm,
our intentions, our messages, the people that we aim to serve are. So it feels very natural to come together and to see between the both of us, how does it unify? Where do we differentiate in seeking this new pathway through what we create? And that brings me to what I want to start with, which is, Josh, my friend, what is your medicine?
mm. It's a good question. And I'd say very simply, my medicine is helping people remember and realize that they are their own medicine. And over the years, I have been a coach for 8 years, have been holding retreats and containers and ceremonies. And the more and more I dive into this work is the more and more I have such utter faith in the magnificent power that lies inside of every single human being. So being a mirror to be able to reflect back to other people their power to heal themselves and to liberate themselves.
I want to highlight in all of that brilliance that you just pointed out, the idea that the healer is already within us. And I'm curious your thoughts. So for a long time, the term healer was actually something that was a big turnoff to me. And that was because how I associate with the word healer is that there's this person that I go off to, there's some guru in the mountains that is going to heal me and they're going to bless me with the thing with which I am missing within myself. And unconsciously, I started to create these associations or attachments to people as being the source of healing or being the source of what I needed in order to feel okay or to feel safe or to shed the anxiety or the depression that I moved through. But it sounds like maybe your vantage point is that it's already within that person.
And a layer deeper, that person who they actually are is already healed. Yes, we are our own healer,
Mm.
but the version of ourselves, our authentic truth, our true essence is already healed. And a lot of the work that I do is helping people reorient their consciousness into a remembrance of they are already whole, worthy, and complete. Now we have somatic bodies and nervous systems and organs and brains and subconscious minds that may be um, out of congruence with that may be carrying trauma, that may be holding on to limiting beliefs. But that's not you, right? We are not our body. We are not our nervous system. We are not our trauma. We are something so much bigger and greater than that. And when we can remember that, then we can start to hold the space for our bodies and quote unquote shadow selves to integrate and to heal. But we are not broken. You are not broken. Anybody listening is not broken. And that's the great illusion and the funny paradox of personal development is we're not really developing anything. We're just remembering who and what we already are, which is pure fucking magic.
Okay. So what you're putting forward is a very, I'm going to say, controversial and dichotomous way of thinking, because it's almost like on one hand we're saying, okay, so I'm not broken, I'm already whole, I'm already in, I'm already just everything that I need to be. I'm healed, I'm whole, and I'm holy, right? And at the same time, I imagine that the version of myself who listened to this conversation, who struggled deeply with depression, who struggled with suicidal ideation, who struggled with incredible amounts and bouts of anxiety, the one that wants to create peace within oneself, how am I to distinguish between, yes, I am healed and I'm also experiencing deep grief or sadness or pain? Where do we draw that line where we're not creating some sense of delusion, but also being able to welcome in the idea that I just need to flip back on remembrance? Where do you draw that line?
I would say that one, it takes an extreme amount of self-awareness to be able to understand that we are both the light and the shadow, right? What I'm speaking to is who we actually
Mm-hmm.
authentically are is the light. And through life, through trauma, through challenging experiences, we start to forget that. And we start to disown and abandon parts of ourselves that this is what you see very often in the spiritual community, what they call spiritual bypassing, right? A lot of people may have this belief of it's all love and light. It's only love and light. And then we start
That's
rejecting and
bullshit.
yeah, exactly. It's 1000% bullshit. But being able to hold space for the pain inside of you while not identifying it with it
Mm-hmm.
is what I am speaking to. Right? If we are identifying with the pain, if we are identifying with the trauma, then we are giving that trauma power over us, and we're identifying with something that is not our true and authentic selves, right? So to be able to bear witness to and hold the space to listen to and acknowledge and accept and process and feel all of the pain inside of you while at the same time recognizing that it's not you. And that takes a lot of work to get to that point. And I'm sure we're going to get deeper into the how in this conversation.
Okay, so would you say that this is pointing a finger then at this idea of witness consciousness? Because there's a distinction between I am depressed, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot. Like, I am depressed. So this is like a mantra that I repeated to myself for an extended period of time, one with which now I recognize was absolutely serving as a disservice to me. Because when I say that I am, it is a form of identity. And identity then begins to filter the beliefs, the thoughts, and the attitudes that I hold about myself, and then thusly influences my
Yes.
external world. Versus what I've been playing with is this idea of I am not depressed, I am experiencing depression, or I'm experiencing what we might say are the symptoms of depression, whether it's lethargy or decreased energy or lack of motivation, however we describe it. Would you say it's like that? Like it's more of being able to see it as a witness, like a step removed versus I am this thing and this is who I am and now I'm stuck here forever?
Yes, 1000%. To be able to experience it without identifying with it, right? That's what we're speaking to. Like, yes, what I'm speaking to is we are these whole, worthy, and complete beings, perfect beings. Yet at the same time, we can experience shame. We can experience fear. We can experience depression. We can experience anxiety. And language is important, right? Whatever you say after I am, you are taking ownership of as being who you are. And I worked in the mental health space for a couple years, and I heard over and over again, I am depressed, because we've been taught by society and by psychiatrists, you have depression, so I am depressed. I have anxiety. And we start to carry around these labels that start to disconnect us from our sovereignty and disconnect us from our power. So this isn't to say that we dismiss the fact that you are experiencing emotions or pain or anxiety or depression, but we're just choosing to not
Yeah.
identify with it so we can let it be heard and seen without it taking over all of us. It's a part of you, but it's not all of you.
It's an aspect of our consciousness, not the totality of our consciousness.
Yes.
Right. And this
Yes.
is something that I've I've grappled with because I've had that version of myself that identified like now I am depression. This is the total of my experience. And it's hard, like it's one thing for us to talk about this mentally and describe it, but I remember the moments in my life where it felt like life was losing color, where there was a dark tinge and a hue to the way that I viewed and saw things. And my experience and how I was relating and describing things, even that was lifeless. Like it felt lifeless. So when we're in it, like when we're in the experience, it can be hard to really grasp that at a level of embodiment. In fact, the embodiment probably feels like shit, depression, lethargy, anxiety, like however we would seek to describe it. But something that captivated me, I was listening, I think it was a podcast, and it was with James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits. And one of the things that he impressed upon the listeners that really struck me was that when asked if you want to start to become, let's just say become, I would like to use the term remember, but to remember yourself or to become a different person, say a more expansive, grown, healed version of oneself, that one must start by first thinking as if they were the type of person that they wanted to identify with or identify as. And if
Yes.
we pair that with Dr. Joe Dispenza's definition of personality, as he says, personality is composed of how we think, how we feel, how we act, or how we behave, which then becomes our personal reality. And if I want to identify as someone who is healthy, then James Clear's logic would be then I need to start to think, okay, if I am a healthy person, do I eat this type of food? Does a healthy person go and run 10 minutes a day? Does a healthy person choose when they go out with friends to choose the healthier option or the unhealthier option? And that right there becomes a very tangible way for us to materialize this idea of the sense of identity. If I identify as I am unhealthy, I am fat, I am obese, I am depressed, I am anxious, I am unworthy. If I start to identify with that level of self, I think equivalent, I feel equivalent, I feel like shit, and then I act equivalent. I don't take care of myself, I don't invest in myself. So it sounds like what you're pointing a finger at is this idea of the remembrance of wholeness is the remembrance that we can choose almost like everything everywhere all at once, that movie where there was the different timelines. Like we can choose a timeline to start to imagine what does this look and feel like. Does that
Yeah.
feel like
Yeah.
kind of what you're pointing a finger at?
Yes, 1000%. And if I can share a quick story that can maybe bring this down to, that can anchor it into practicality. About 6 years ago, I'm not going to get to the whole story, maybe we will in this conversation, but I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and IBS. And if anybody has ever had or experienced fibromyalgia or IBS or any gut issues, it's debilitating. It's so painful. And it basically was shutting me down anytime that I had flare-ups of inflammation in my joints or in my gut. Anything I would eat would cause me to flare up, and it was so painful. And I did not know how to hold that pain. I did not know how to navigate that pain. So what do we normally do? We resist it. We fight it. We try to find solutions for it, right? We go to war with the pain, trying to overcome it. And there was this one time when I was laying in my bed, completely shut down in so much pain, and I'm just tossing and turning, like suicidal thoughts coming through my head too, because I was in constant pain. And this voice in me whispered, stop fighting it and try loving it. And I don't know where that voice
Hmm.
came from. This was before I was really down the path, but I listened to it and I laid on my back, put my hand over my stomach, and took deep breaths and spoke to it by saying, I love you. 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 And within a minute, the pain was completely gone and my body was vibrating in love. And I started to apply this in other areas of my life. When I would experience anxiety, I would pause instead of fighting it, speak to the anxiety. I love you. I see you. I understand. I love you. And then same thing, the anxiety would go away. And then if I would experience shame or fear or anything going on in my life, I would practice what I now call self-love infusion therapy and filling myself up with love. This is what we're speaking to in terms of identity. When I'm experiencing pain and I'm choosing to love the pain, now I am identifying with love rather than with the pain, right? And when we take into account neuroscience and quantum physics, I am reorienting my identity to a certain timeline and a certain version of myself where I am pain free, right? By loving it, I reorient my consciousness back into love, which is truth, and out of pain. I can hold the space for pain while loving it. And this is where it gets tricky. You can't love it to get rid of it. It would almost be like a parent loving their
Hmm.
child to get them to get rid of it, right? And this is where we start playing this mission.
I'm gonna love you so you shut the fuck up.
And you know you're doing that if you say it's not working, right? I have so many clients who meditate and they're like, it's not working. I'm like, well, what does working look like? Well, the anxiety going away. Well, imagine if when you were a kid and you were anxious and going to your parents and they just started breathing when you were looking for support, how would you feel? I would feel pretty dismissed and ignored, right? And that's where we need to recognize the shadows of this work, where we can be using them as ways to bypass the pain instead of holding space to process and to love and heal and integrate the pain.
So if I were to whittle that down very simply, and if I'm super simplifying, just correct me. But would you say that bypassing is the moment that we decide that the behavior that we are engaging with is filled with the intention of doing so just to make something go away?
Yes. Yes. And this can also include spiritual practices, right? Breath work, meditation, plant medicines, and psychedelics can be just as much be coping mechanisms and escapism as going to the club and drinking and taking drugs, right? It's all about intent. Are we meditating and doing these practices to fix ourselves and to change how we're feeling because we don't like how we're feeling? Or are we doing them to nourish ourselves and to love ourselves exactly as we are? So I stopped phrasing meditation as meditation and I just started phrasing it as sacred, intimate time with myself. So when I go into meditation, I speak to every part of me. Whatever needs to come forward today, whatever you're feeling is okay. I'm here to bear witness to it. But I can only do that because I recognize that those things, whatever comes up, is not me. I am the one holding space for it. I am the present moment. I am love and compassion. I am not the pain. I am not the shame. I'm not the anxiety. They're inside of me, being experienced, but that's my job to hold that space of love and compassion.
This feels very. This feels like a gray area, like such a gray area, because I imagine this line. There's this metaphorical but also literal line. Is I'm like swiping my hand in the air, like I'm chopping energy up. Like there's this line where I'm using something with intention for the sake of just doing the practice itself versus doing it to make something go away. And how I think
Yes.
about it is, how do I, like, let's just say I'm experiencing a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. And the reason why I go and I now meditate, breathe, do an ice bath, whatever I choose to do, I'm doing so because I do want to decrease that anxiety. I do want to decrease that stress to a certain degree. Like, I do want it to go away because I don't want it to feel this way all of the time. Of course, I want to learn how to sit with it and feel it. How do I, am I to just not want to have that intention? It's almost like, when they talk about like Taoism, like the way that can be spoken is no longer the eternal way. If I say, oh, well, I'm just going to try and not act like I'm not wanting this to go away. But the reality is that I do want to experience more peace within my mind and my body. How do I toe that line?
A great quote from Dr. Gabriel Mate is, "Our attempt to escape pain is more painful than the pain itself." So by trying to avoid the anxiety and resist the anxiety, we actually create more anxiety. If you can imagine a little kid trying to run away from their shadow, what happens to the shadow? Does it go away or does it follow them? Right? It's
It
going to
cuts
follow
itself
them.
off and it walks away. Some Peter Pan stuff.
That's what many of us are wanting to happen. Maybe if I just ignore this anxiety and try to make it go away for long enough and hard enough, it'll go away. But does it actually work? No. Like, show me one person who has fought their anxiety in that way and has overcome it and has now lives a peaceful life. But when the anxiety comes up, right, being able to meet the anxiety and listen to what it's communicating to you. When your phone says low battery, what is it communicating to you?
Bitch, charge me.
When your car says low gas, what is it communicating?
Time to fill her up.
Yes, you're good at this. Very smart. When your body is tired,
I'm
what is
so
it
smart. My mom tells me all the time.
and when your body is tired, what is your body communicating?
Time to sleep, time to rest.
When your body is dehydrated, what is your body communicating to you?
I need some agua. Por
Yes.
favor.
So when we are now experiencing anxiety, what is anxiety communicating to us? Because we may be judging anxiety as the problem when at the same time it may be communicating a solution.
So then, if being thirsty communicates I need water, my stomach's gurgling. It's like, homie, please give me some food. We hungry. With, say, the physiological experience of anxiety, it's not maybe the most black and white.
Right.
How do we start to get connected to what is being communicated that is needed? So if me trying to make the anxiety go away is not going to make it go away, me saying, hey, belly, stop being hungry. Stop being hungry. This is not the time to be hungry. That's not going
Right.
to work, right? What can I do to tune into what it is that it is communicating to me when it's kind of a gray area?
If you were in a partnership with a partner, girlfriend, wife, husband, whoever it is, how would you figure that out? By mind reading or by communicating?
Telepathy, if we're really tapped in, but I think that the proper answer here is to ask.
What is your need here? Right? We get to, we start to,
Right.
we have intimacy and communication with our relationships with other people, but we haven't yet developed that intimacy with ourselves and that relationship with ourselves. And intimacy, into
Mm-hmm.
me I see, we develop intimacy by looking within and starting to cultivate that internal dialogue from a space of understanding, right? And as if we were little children, what are little children looking for? Attention, love, understanding, support, right? So imagine if there was a little child literally trapped inside of your being, and the only way they had to communicate with you was through thoughts and anxiety and emotions, then we better start to have a conversation with them. Otherwise, we are playing out the same patterns that our parents created within us, that their parents created within them, and going back generations of dismissal and abandonment and rejection, where we were never taught as children that, oh, I experience pain and it's okay. And I still love you. How can I support you? Right. So if we don't do this inner child work to recreate different patterns, then we're going to recreate them on ourselves by ignoring them. Right. Then eventually we're going to have children and we're going to recreate it with them. But we get to break the cycle by starting to do that inner work of starting to cultivate that intimate relationship with ourselves. And that is where all of this work starts. And that's where it's all going, is deeper and deeper into an intimate and loving relationship with yourself, all of yourself.
Okay, now you're pointing a finger at inner child work, which I'm not sure if you have a particular age range at which you're pointing a finger at. I've heard that there is that we're total subconscious until we're about 7, and that's when we are, if you will, most we're so plastic, meaning almost everything that comes in, there's no filter that's saying, this is useful, this is not useful. Let's make sure we don't bring this bad shit in and we bring this good stuff in. Like, there's not much of that. We're just a big sponge for everything that's coming in. Hence why when we do things like breath work or psychedelics or these altered states of consciousness, if you will, even meditation, they will switch our brainwave state into, more in the alpha theta delta range, where we can start to make suggestions to our subconscious, be like, hey, you know what, you actually kind of beautiful, don't forget it, shoddy. Like, we can start to put those suggestions in, if you will. And what I'm thinking is that you're saying that the inner child work then is going into and looking at the different subconscious patterns that we developed in our developmental years. Is that what you're pointing a finger at?
Yes, 1000%. There's many different ways to look at it. You can look at it as shadow work. You can look at it as inner child healing. A lot of my work that I do with clients is based around the philosophy of internal family systems, that we develop patterns and coping mechanisms and create safety officers inside of ourselves as ways to protect ourselves. Right. And often these traumas that happen when we were young don't need to be big traumas of someone dying or being sexually assaulted. Trauma can also be not getting something that you needed, like not getting enough love or attention. So then we start to subconsciously start to believe that we're not worthy of love or attention. So coming back to the same conversation, when we're feeling anxiety, we have never been taught that it's okay to experience that anxiety. And we have never been taught that we can be supported in this anxiety. So then we reject it the way that we were rejected when we were children. So by doing this, we're starting to create safety in the nervous system. When anxiety comes up, it is the body's way of trying to process emotions that have been suppressed and repressed. Right. So then they start to come up, and this is what a lot of people experience when they start a meditation practice or they start working with psychedelics or plant medicine, is you're creating the space in the nervous system for these emotions from childhood and throughout our entire lives to come up and be processed. So a lot of people will say, I'm feeling more anxious when I meditate. I'm feeling more anxious now that I'm microdosing. I heard that from a lot of people in my microdosing program. You're feeling more anxious, not because more anxiety is happening to you. You're feeling more anxious because you're more open to be able to listen to the anxiety that is trying to be healed and processed through you. Because most of our emotions, right, through life, because we have never been taught how to navigate our emotions. For some reason in school, they thought the Pythagorean theorem was more important than emotional intelligence and learning how to process their emotions. I have never once fucking used the Pythagorean theorem, but every single day there are emotions to navigate, right? So we've never been taught this, and this is why anybody listening, like, bring a sense of patience and grace and compassion to yourself, because we were never taught this. Our parents never taught us this, most of us at least. So bring some grace to ourselves that we're learning a whole new skill that is not super easy or black and white. So when this stuff starts to come up, we're going to slip. We're going to go back into old addictive behaviors, but really always bringing it back to love is the answer. I am so convinced that love is the only way of navigating this journey. And something that I share with a lot of my clients is also a book that I'm in the process of writing. You can't hate yourself into someone you love. You can't hate yourself into someone you love. And this is where a lot of this work in personal development and self-help, why so many people feel like the more work that they try to do on themselves, the more miserable they are getting, because they are being so hard on themselves. Right? We're trying so hard to become this version of ourselves that's successful and happy and at peace and living in a higher vibration. So then we start shaming and judging and criticizing the human parts of ourselves. We're freaking babies. And that's why I love what you always say, like bringing the fun back into personal development. Right? We take this so serious, and we're trying to get somewhere, thinking that once I get there, once I'm living in a higher vibration, once I get rid of all these traumas, then I'm going to be good. Then I'm going to be happy forever. A PSA, that's probably not the case. But we get to have fun through it all. We get to play through it all. We get to love ourselves through it all. And I promise you, there was no greater level of self-trust and self-respect and self-love than you can cultivate, than to know that whatever you are going through in life, I got me. Whether I'm going through a breakup or a breakdown or financial turmoil or experiencing anxiety or shame or fear, I got me, because I've developed intimate relationships with all of those emotions.
I'm hearing a radical commitment to compassion and self-love.
Yes.
Which are concepts or constructs to describe the ways in which we choose to interact with ourselves. One of the things I find helpful is in the way that I experience having a relationship with you or my sisters or my other close friends, relatives, etc. Those are all relationships, but there's also the relationship that we have with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's a relationship that we have with food, with money. Every single one of these is a relationship. What is a relationship? It's an energetic dynamic where there is a bi-directional flow of information. How I relate to money. Money is a scary thing. How do I interact with money? It's scary. I'm afraid of debt. I'm very frugal. So now I I start to observe how I'm relating to these things, and thusly I see then how I interact with the world and the people around me and everything else, because they're all connected, right? As you said,
Yes.
the shadow cannot be disconnected from the person. No matter where you go, there you always are. At all times, there you are.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm curious about is this is one of those moments where the way in which you're speaking of having this relentless compassion, this relentless commitment to loving on oneself through the process, because there is me being one of those people and working through it in my own ways of having some sense of worth attached to some outcome. How many people did I serve, or how much work got done today, or whatever it is, right? These chasing a carrot type experience that, oh, once I get the carrot, once I get the carrot, only to realize that you get to that endpoint and then it's not nearly as exciting or as fulfilling as you thought it would be. And then on to the next thing, on to the next thing to chase, on to the next thing to pursue, the next milestone, the next thing to buy, whatever it is, constantly seeking the next dopamine hit. What I'm curious is where did that start to flip for you? Like what led up to this moment? There had to be some, like, I hated myself, I hated myself, I hated myself. And then something had to have shifted to where you decided that you were going to commit to. Maybe it wasn't all in, maybe it was little by little, but where did that start for you and what did that journey look like?
Great question. So to answer that question, I have to give a little bit of backstory. When I was 16 years old, throughout all of middle school and high school, I was ruthlessly bullied. I was very short because I had a human growth hormone deficiency, very short, and I had developed a food addiction because food was my drug to be able to cope with the chaos of my family, of my abusive alcoholic father getting split up from my mother trying to raise four boys all by herself. It was a chaotic household, so I found food as my coping mechanism. And I start to gain weight, people are bullying me, and I start to slowly but surely hate myself ruthlessly. And I escaped into video games, I escaped into food, I isolated myself from the world. And eventually there was just this spark of, oh shit, I have to change. Where I was at my doctor's office and he told me that you gained 14 pounds in this month. In this past 3 months, you've gained 40 pounds. At this rate, you're going to end up 600 pounds and absurdly overweight. And at that moment, I decided to change, and I went down the route that I feel like a lot of people go in fitness, which was a very obsessive route, where I got obsessed with fitness. And I thought, this is what we're speaking to in terms of the carrot on the stick. Once I lose weight, then I'll be loved. Once I lose weight, then people will stop bullying me. Once I lose weight, then I'll be accepted. So I stopped eating. I literally went on a starvation diet for 2 to 3 months over summer, lost 45 pounds over one summer, went back to school the next year. Nobody recognized me. And what happened? Did I get that love and validation and approval? No. People started to make fun of me now because I was skinny, and people started to call me anorexic. So, oh shit, if people make fun of me for being fat and people make fun of me for being skinny, maybe I need to love myself? No, I need to get jacked. I looked at the people who are fit and ripped, and I'm like, I need to get jacked. All those people are getting all the women, they're getting all the love, they're getting all the validation. So I started going to the gym, and I fell in love with powerlifting and strength training. Still to this day, that is the practice that I do every single day without fail. I love it, just now in a more healthy way. So I start training, and no matter how ripped I got, no matter how strong I got, I was 135 pounds and deadlifting 420. I was 135 pounds and squatting 415 pounds. I was on the track to break world records, but behind the scenes, what was I doing? Looking at myself in the mirror, judging everything that I saw. Even though I had a six pack, even though I had veins popping out of my stomach, I would look out my side and be like, there's a little bit too much fat there. And there was this relentless hatred that I had towards myself and this desire to become perfect. And no matter how perfect you get, there is still another flaw that you will find, because if you seek, you will find. Right? So eventually, during this time, I start developing really severe eating disorders, where because of my food addiction, I would go on these periods of dieting, very restrictive dieting, tracking every single macro that I ate, and binging on tens of thousands of calories of food. And originally, I just kept doing that. And then I realized this is not good for my fitness levels. So I started to make myself throw up. So I would binge, make myself throw up, and keep training. So no one knew this was happening. Everybody just saw me as this fit dude and this fitness freak, but no one knew in the background that I was binging on food and making myself throw up every single night of the week. And this persisted for years. And it wasn't until I was supposed to compete in a powerlifting competition and break those two world records. 2 weeks before that, I started to get injured. Every single part of my body was falling apart. And I eventually had to put off the powerlifting competition, and I ended up going to my first music festival. And at this music festival, I had my first psychedelic experience. I took a tab of acid, and I was standing at the stage. I was watching Space Jesus, I believe. And at this time, I was the type of person who would just be at a school dance, just like head down, shoulders forward, like very, very shy and insecure. I did not dance. I did not let myself express myself. So I was standing there just like watching everybody dance. And I thought I was like on an alien spaceship, like that we were abducted. I'm like, why are all these people dancing this way? Like, why are they dancing so weird? And I was just feeling so disconnected from reality. And my friend Greg comes over to me. He doesn't even remember saying this, but to this day, that was the moment that changed everything to me. He came over to me, grabbed me by the shoulders, and said, Josh, you try to be this big macho man on the outside, but inside you're just a scared little child. And then he just pranced off. And in that moment, my psyche fractured into a million different pieces. It's almost like someone threw a rock at the mirror in the image that I had spent so long constructing, and my whole self identity fell apart. And what happened when that shell and that self identity fell apart, all of the emotions and traumas that I had been shielding with that armor started to come to the surface. All of these emotions that I was unfamiliar with. And I fought it and I fought it because I did not know what I know now. So I spiraled. I spiraled into this very, very dark place. And what I did that nobody should do, especially now that I'm a trauma-informed plant medicine facilitator, I went back to my campsite, and you know what I thought would be a good idea? No, I bought an edible cookie from this girl earlier in the day. And if anybody has ever used cannabis with psychedelics, you know that it makes it drastically more intense. So I go back to the campsite and I take one bite of this cookie, and the girl who sold it to us said, "Do not eat this whole cookie. There is 3 potent doses inside of this cookie." But because of my history with emotional eating, I ate that cookie. It brought me home to myself, and then I ate the whole cookie. And then oh shit, oh shit. And I spent the next 6 hours spiraling into this void. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Get Out, but when the mother hypnotizes the black dude, he falls into the sunken place. It felt like I was sinking millions of miles into this void inside of my mind. And I had become so disconnected from myself where I forgot my name. I forgot who my parents were. I forgot who my brothers were. I knew that I had this passion for working out, but like the more that I tried to remember why I love working out, the more it faded away. It's kind of like when you try to remember a dream, the more you try to remember it, you like repel it away. The more I tried to remember any aspect of who I was, it started to fade away. So I was just left in this void thinking and really knowing that I'm going to end up schizophrenic, that this is how people end up fucked up. All right. So I spent the entire night just paranoid and so like shooken up. And I just forgot who I was. And most of the times when people have these ego death experiences, on the other side of it is this profound realization of who they are. right? Our identity constructs fall apart and we realize I'm all love and light. I am God, all these things. But I wasn't left with that. I was left with this nothingness. And I went home. This period of time lasted 6 months where I was so disconnected from myself. This is when I was diagnosed from depression, anxiety, PTSD, ADHD, fibromyalgia, IBS. I was suicidal. I couldn't get out of bed. And it wasn't until 6 months later that I decided to get off of the medications and have a psilocybin journey that I remembered who I was. And getting to your question of how did I learn to love myself is, one, I first had to remember who I actually was. So during the psilocybin journey, my consciousness was taken up to space and I was looking down on earth with these two angels standing next to me. And they asked me, "Are you ready to come to earth?" And in that moment, I remembered that I chose to come to earth. And they asked me what my purpose is. In that moment, I knew my purpose. They sent me back down. I remembered viscerally being born. I remembered coming out of my mother's womb. I remember being in the hospital room. And over the next 8 hours of the psilocybin journey, I remembered all of the suppressed traumas from being born up into that moment and spent the next hours crying. Then I end up going to the bathroom. I go to the bathroom and I look at myself in the mirror. And I fell in love with myself because I was able to see that my body was not me. It was just a part of me. Because I remembered who I was able to look at my body, the thing that I hated and shamed for so long. I was able to look at that and love it. And I started to cry. I started to cry in sorrow and started just holding my body saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for hurting you. I'm sorry for shaming you. I'm sorry for judging you. And in that moment, I made this commitment for my life to love myself. And it wasn't just that one moment, like you said. It was a period of needing to learn that self-love on a deeper level. Because it's one thing to learn to love yourself, but it's another thing to learn to love yourself in moments when you don't love yourself. So it has certainly been a journey and a process of learning how to cultivate this love for myself and all of myself. But that's my anchor. Like, I've anchored in my consciousness of love is the way. Always come back to love. So roundabout answer to answer your question, but hope that makes sense.
If you get nothing else from this podcast, they just know that the answer is love. There's one word, it's love.
That's it. It's simple. The truth is often simple.
The truth is often simple. As much as my brain likes to make things very complex and ornate and do all the extra shit, oftentimes the simple truths, the simple answers are the ones that stick.
Yep.
And everything that you're sharing right there. So the original idea was what is it that got you to this place of self-love? And clearly it was first by not being in self-love. It was an incredible amount of self-deprecation. And it's interesting, you pointed out that what started off as not loving yourself, eating, gaining a bunch of weight, going to the doctor being like, something's got to change. So you ran to one side of the spectrum, being skinny, then you ran to the other side of the spectrum. And the interesting thing is we can pick things up along the way that support us, i.e. you picked up the importance of eating healthy, working out healthy, but sometimes the trying to run away from the thing that we're needing to address has us run into the exact same problem. It just has a different mask.
Yes.
And this is something that was impressed upon me by one of my mentors. I think it was making a funny about how there was, an aspect in the way in which my dad expressed. I was like, that so like bothered me. Like, I don't want to be like that, in that way. And he's like, well, if you try to not be like that, you're going to end up being like that, just in the opposite reflection of it. Because trying to run away from something pushes you into the polarity of the opposite, because the intention isn't pure. The intention isn't, I want to be my own person. I want to be a healthy person. I want to choose to be the type of father this, or I want to be the type of healthy person who does that. It's, I want to do everything I can to not be that. And that way of thinking and that way of being is what has us go. And the image that you painted, what I imagine is, and that not that this is your image, but I just imagine this human who's looking at himself in the mirror And by every measure of someone who's looking on the outside, just seeing chiseled, just top to bottom chiseled, looking fucking cut, looking clean. And the person who's looking through the eyes is
Mm,
seeing themselves and not seeing that. But even
yes.
more so, it's not just like seeing the beauty of the architecture that you created through the relentless time, energy, and effort that you put into it, but inside what you're really seeing is the reflection, not the external reflection, but the internal reflection of it's not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. I'm not
Yes.
worthy. And when Homeboy hits you in the middle of the festival with that line, he's just like, you're full of shit, by the way, and you're actually just there trying to run away from something. It's like, bro, like,
Yep.
Homeboy saw right through the entire veil right into you.
Yep. I'm sure
And
a lot of people did.
what was that?
I'm sure a lot of people did. Right? It's easy to tell when people are full of shit. And
We know
to
we're
add,
full of shit.
we're all full of shit. We got shit inside of us. That's why you need a colon cleanse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Albert Einstein has this great quote that goes, "You cannot solve a problem with the same state of consciousness that created it." Right?
Right.
So if it's not what we do, but how we do it. Yes, dieting, eating healthy, exercise, all healthy things. But if the how is coming from, if the come from is from a place of shame, we're only adding more shame to the problem. Right? So for example, shame is what created me being overweight. And now I'm going about it with the same shame in order to make myself fit. So I'm adding more reinforcement to the identity that I am not enough and worthy as I am, that I need to prove myself of being worthy. And anybody who has gone about life in that way knows that over there is not better than here. And that's why we see so many people who achieve enormous amounts of success and have all the women and have all the cars and the career and the money, and they're still addicted to drugs. They're still depressed. They're still killing themselves. Why? Because the come from is from a place of trying to get to love. And the more that you try to get love and chase love is the moment that you continue to affirm that you are not love. That's why I always bring it back to love is the only way. You can't hate yourself into someone you love. You're not going to continue to be so hard on yourself to be perfect in all of your rituals and all of your practices and your diet and all of your spiritual practices and devotions. Because if you're doing it from a place of shame and shaming yourself if you're not perfect, that's where this whole world of personal development turns into this self-defeating journey of perfection and self-hatred.
That's something that you put down when I was asking you before the conversation of one of your favorite topics, and you said that it is how personal development is making people miserable.
Yes.
And I'm assuming it's because of that exact train of thought, which is if anything I'm doing is built on the foundation of trying to not confront, very simply not confront, whether it's our health, our relationships, our well being, any aspect of our life where we're doing something as some form of escape from the real pain that is hidden within, that it's never going to be enough. This is something I've been
Yes.
playing with as an idea of filling a hole versus remembering our wholeness. When we try to fill a hole, we use drugs. We use drugs to fill a hole. It's a temporary band aid, but it doesn't really deal with the root thing with which needs to be brought back into the remembrance of wholeness, to be brought back into the remembrance of love. Because
Yes.
filling a hole with drugs, and the interesting thing is, what is a drug versus, in my opinion, medicine? Medicine promotes remembrance versus drugs promotes, well, more whole HOLE-ness versus WHOLE-ness, which is what medicine provides. That the same thing, the same device, let's just say device, can be used, i.e., let's just say psychedelic medicine. But if the intention is not pure, then that same thing that could serve me and bring me into a state of remembrance can also put me into a state of non-remembrance, into a state of disassociation or disconnection or dysmorphia, any kind of dis where the functionality of a thing is not in the way that it's supposed to be. that's the byproduct of it coming from the wrong place. And I'm curious if that's when you say people becoming miserable because of personal development, what do you mean and why is it so?
So there's many ways to look at it, but one way is one, beware of unearned wisdom. Right? This is a quote from Carl Jung. And the way that I take that is because of this digital age, because there's so much information out there, because we're constantly looking at spiritual influencers living a perfect life, we're constantly comparing ourselves. We're reading all of these books that are telling us what to do and how to be, creating a larger and larger gap between where we are and where we're trying to become. So then we get the
Hmm.
illusion is I am the broken one. I am the flawed one. And now I need to do all of these things in order to become worthy, in order to become enough. That is why the come from is important, where you're coming from, because otherwise you're creating this cyclical loop inside of your mind that is going to continue to push away the love that you are trying to chase. That is going to continue to push away the worthiness that you're trying to prove yourself of. Because if it's not conditional, if it's not unconditional, it will always be conditional. If your worth and your enoughness and your love is always conditional on you doing something or achieving something, then it's not real. It's fabricated. It's artificial. It's like injections inside of your identity. You're trying to artificially inject confidence and belief into yourself through the means of having a perfect morning routine or having a perfect diet or live or being positive all the time, right? We're trying to prove ourselves of being enough when that is the illusion because you already are enough. We say this all the time, right? You always have been and you always will be enough. I'm not Christian, but we are created in God's image, whole, perfect, and complete. So the moment that we tell ourselves that we are not whole, that we are flawed, that we are broken, we detach ourselves from the already enoughness, which is the truth of our being, where sovereignty and freedom and love exists. That is heaven. And we put ourselves into hell, which is the illusion, the delusion of I am not enough, I am lacking, I am unworthy, and there's something wrong with me. And then we spend all of our time trying to fix those problems when they're all illusions. So that's why we always speak to this concept of remembrance, right? It's not about becoming, it's about remembering.
To remember is, it would seem
Mm,
to remove the old stories. Maybe a better term is shed.
yes.
To shed, to remove, to let go of the old stories, the old beliefs, the old patterns that we store within our bodies that bring us out of the harmony that we just inherently are. Like the child who loves to play, sing, and dance, who has an interaction with an adult during during school or a friend where they are shunned for their expression and then they close and they become a sliver or a fraction of themselves as a way to protect themselves because there's this deep biological imperative for us to be loved, to be held, to be witnessed. But if what we learn is that in order for me to be loved, witnessed, and held, I have to be and act a certain way, then how can I ever show up as who I truly am? If who I truly am is immeasurable, it is infinite, it is divine as it is, but there are things outside of me that are reflecting back to me that I'm only lovable with. What a terrifying thing to have to approach the world with, especially in formative years when we don't know how to discern what is versus what isn't good information, versus when we start to have a higher level of autonomy and we can start to question the thoughts in our skull and actually ask ourselves, do I agree with this? Do I not agree with this? Why is this true? Why is this untrue? How does it feel in my body? And then I surround myself with people like you or people in our containers where we can feel safe to be witnessed and loved in what we are. Because as much work as I've done on myself, I still need to be reminded of my power, of my capacity for love, of the importance for my self expression. You've been a reminder for that because I'll have moments where I get so caught up in the work and what I feel I'm supposed to be doing, what I am seeking to achieve. And you've always been a constant reminder of, dude, like, do you realize how fucking incredible you are? The impact that you're making, the love that you're sharing. that shit's a fucking enough. But it's that subconscious belief that has the reins. It's like trotting around the horse, like fucking shit up, trying to convince me otherwise, burning buildings to the ground, when here you are, the remembrance mirror, the mirror of remembrance, to show me, to reflect back to me, hey, you as you are so fucking enough.
Mm.
And I think that's why I would say one of my deepest medicines are the people in my life like you. Because when I forget, there is someone who can help me remember.
That's it. That's it, brother. We need such little encouragement to be able to feel seen and heard and understood. And that's why this whole concept of self regulation is so important. It's so important to be able to nourish and love yourself and be able to have that sovereignty. But without co regulation, without community, without support, it means fucking nothing. Right? This capitalistic
Mm.
society that we live in that has taught us all to be independent. No one's independent. We are all interdependent.
Mm-hmm.
Remember on New Year's Eve this year, we were camping and I was feeling so burnt out and so unworthy and so disconnected that I ended up going into the car away from everybody. And I thought like I didn't want other people to be affected by my energy. I didn't want, so I went to go figure it out by myself. That was my old pattern. But what happened is three of you, Aunt, Jolie, came to the car and held me and didn't tell me to feel better and didn't tell me, hey, we're camping, it's New Year's Eve, brighten up. What did you tell me? It's okay. Hey, what you're feeling is so normal and I understand it. We are here for you and you can stay in this car and we will stay with you, or we can go, or you can come back to with us. Whatever you choose, just know we support you. And that may seem like a small act of kindness, but that rewrites years of trauma. That is what creates new pathways in the nervous system to feel safe. So next time I am not feeling 100%, next time I'm feeling disconnected, my somatic body and my nervous system and my shadow have been taught, oh, it's safe to feel this. It's safe to experience this. I'm not going to be judged. And that's why having supportive people around you is so fucking important. That's why I'm so grateful for you and this community that we have. And I speak to this because, like I said, it's so important to have practices that we can self-regulate, but we're not meant to do this alone.
When I was in the piteous pit of depression, my chosen form of dealing with it was isolation.
Mm.
I spent a lot of time in a dark room by myself playing video games. I didn't know how to ask for help. Like it's funny to say that because it's like, what do you mean you know how? Just fucking shoot a text, call someone. But in my brain, there was this constant nagging that no one would understand,
Mm.
or that I didn't want to be seen as weak, that I didn't want to be a burden. I spent so much time replaying this broken record of I need to be strong on my own. I need to be able to stand on my own. I need to figure this out on my own. But the medicine was always in community. As you said, self-regulation, important. Got to do my own practices. And there's also got to be a point where I recognize and realize that the isolation is contributing to my experience of feeling not good.
Mm-hmm.
of feeling disconnected. Because when I can lean on you to remind me in the moments when I have forgotten that it's okay. You are allowed to be where you are. Just the story that you were describing on New Year's, I'm not sure that I'd ever related it to it that way, but I've also been given those moments. Those moments when someone showed up for me in a way that was contrary to my past experiences and it rewrote years, if not decades. I can't actually like track it in my body, but there was a moment my body was just like, ooh, this is what we've been looking for.
Mm.
We've been looking for that moment when someone would meet us in the depths of what we were experiencing and not try to change it, not try to make it different, make it better or worse, but to just hold it. So when you say a lot of this journey is about coming back into this remembrance of self love, it is also an act of self love to say, I am fucking hurting
Yes.
and I desire so deeply to just be witnessed and held in my hurt.
Yes. That's it. Not to be solved, right? That's what. How does it feel when you are expressing a pain to someone else and they're just like, oh, just look at the positive side, and they start giving you solutions? It's fucking frustrating, right? None of us want
I
that.
have an answer. Invalidating as fuck.
Exactly. So bringing it home to ourselves, because we're not always going to have someone there to go to. So to be able to know how to have this internal dialogue with ourselves, what we're often doing is giving solutions to the pain inside of us instead of just listening to it. Right? We're giving solutions, we're trying to fix. I feel anxious, so let me go meditate to make this go away. Right? I feel unworthy, so let me go scroll through Tinder to look for some worthiness. Right? You're not going to find it. You're not going to find your self-worth through an hour of TikToks. Right? It's all going to come from this deep excavation and this relentless pursuit of wholeness from within. Right? So when anxiety or pain shows up, can we hold it and communicate with it just the way that we would want somebody else to communicate with us? Hey, it's okay. I
Hmm.
understand. I'm here and I love you. And if I can, I would love to share a very practical process of what I teach my clients of how to actually do this, because this is very nuanced and esoteric. But I call it the ABCD process. It's the ABCs of reparenting, right? We need to teach ourselves and be like, again, co-regulation is important, but often this journey, you're alone most of the time. So having these practices to be able to go through is so helpful. So ABCD, what is A? Awareness. Say you're going through your day and you start having a panic attack, or you start feeling anxious, or you start to feel this knot of shame and fear in your stomach. Normally what we do is we just look for something to make us ourselves feel better, right? But that's normally not the solution that we need. So first, awareness. What am I feeling? Right? Just take a pause. First step, pause, and then just bring awareness to what I'm feeling. Okay, and often not the heaviness, and I mean not the stories of what we're feeling, but what we're feeling in the body. So I'm feeling tightness in my chest. I'm feeling very heavy. I'm feeling lethargic. I'm feeling this knot in my stomach. Okay. Now B is breathe. And often we're doing A and B at the same time. Bringing awareness to what we're feeling, just noticing the hotness in the skin or the coldness or the sensations in the body. We're starting to bring our awareness to the felt experience, not the stories, not the judgments, the felt experience. And what does the breath do? Right? The breath is what gives us an anchor into this present moment and starts to create safety in the nervous system. Because what does communicate to the body? That we're in danger.
Not safe.
Yes, we're not safe here. Right? The same way, if we were being chased by a bear, we would breathe fast and shallowly. The body goes into a protection mode, a fight or flight. And the body doesn't know the difference between real fears and real threats or perceived threats. Right? So anxiety could literally be a perceived threat to the body, thus throwing us into a fight or flight response where we are unsafe. Now, what does what does that communicate to the body?
Parasympathetic activation, a little relaxation.
Yes, safety. Right? So the body, we can only breathe slow and deep if we are safe. So you do that long enough, the body and the nervous system is going to start to feel safe. And when the body and nervous system starts to feel safe and starts to feel seen and heard, it starts to process. Right? So as you're going through A and B, awareness, what am I feeling? B, breathe, create safety in the nervous system. Then you might start to notice some tears come through. Then you might start to notice some emotions come through. And this C is compassion. It's okay. Right? We get to be in this space of it's okay. Whatever you're feeling is okay. It's okay that you're feeling anxiety. I understand. You're going through a lot. You have a lot on your plate right now, but you're doing enough. You're doing enough, and I see you and I love you. And we get to stay in this process. And maybe just by you giving yourself that love and validation, maybe more emotions are going to come up. I have this one client, 84-year-old woman. She was, for the first 5 weeks of us coaching together, her main problem that she was communicating was, I'm so irritable. I'm so angry. And I guided her through a breathwork experience and guided her through this exact process. And I asked her, okay, where are you feeling the anger? It's in my stomach. Okay, go deeper into that anger. What does it feel like? It feels tight. It feels scattered. It feels very heavy. Okay, what's beneath that anger? Sadness. Okay, where is sadness inside of you? It's in my chest. What does it feel like? And then she started crying, right? What we may perceive to be one emotion is really another one wanting to come through. So in this process where we stay in this ABCD process of, okay, now compassion, it's okay. Now more emotions might start to come up. Okay, what am I feeling? And this awareness isn't necessarily a story or a dialogue judging the experience. It's just awareness. Bringing the awareness into the felt experience, continuing to breathe. It's okay. It's okay. Right? And we allow this process to play out, and we start to process emotions that we did not even know are there because we spend so much of our life distracted and numbed and stimulated with all of our attention out here on our TVs and our phones and our relationships and food, X, Y, and Z, that the moment that space becomes present, now it's all going to start to come up. Right? And then once that starts to play out, once the body starts to process these emotions and you start to feel light again, more open, more centered, more grounded, then the last step is D, decide. What do I need? What would support me? Right? Maybe I'm just really tired. I need to rest. Going for a walk in nature could be really supportive. Journaling about this is coming up for me. Maybe journaling would be supportive. Maybe I haven't eaten in a long time. Let me go have a meal. Right? But we can only really figure out our needs by having that compassionate dialogue and conversation with ourselves. Instead of just trying to solve the problem, we develop an intimate relationship with it and we find out what the need really is, which is often love, compassion, patience, grace, understanding. You're never going to do this process and find out what you really need is to be hard on yourself and beat yourself up and be even more perfect. Yet most of us are going through life looking for solutions in areas that they don't exist.
Oh, I love the practical ways for us to come back home. you are one of the few people that I know. I don't know many coaches, but I'm going to go so far as to say beyond coaches into humans. You're one of the few people that I know who has a similar relentless, just relentless commitment to compassion. And I use this word so much that it's going to be bothersome to some people who listen to me long enough. And that is because I fucking love, love this idea that compassion allows there to be a softening in the containers, in the areas, in the context where we are being too hard, where we're
Mm.
being too brittle with ourselves, and welcoming with open arms. Like the big thing I'm taking away from this conversation is to fully welcome ourselves, to fully embrace ourselves in the totality of who we are, to embrace the version of us that doesn't feel like it's good enough unless it completes X, Y, and Z, to embrace the version of us who's done wrong by our significant other. Maybe we cheated and there was some infidelity, to embrace the version of ourselves that chooses to consistently eat the foods that don't work for our highest intention, our highest goals, like whatever it is, that we welcome it with open arms and deep compassion. It reminds me of a quote that one of our mentors, Fabiano, spoke to in the breathwork program, that both the victim and the victimizer deserve healing.
Yes.
And I want to extend that even further and to say they deserve love, they deserve compassion, they deserve all of that, because when I don't offer that to myself and I choose to be hard, to be difficult with myself, that's when I feel further away. And the way that you were describing that process with your client of let's what's showing up, where do you, right, so awareness, right, where is it, breath, okay, breathing into that, okay, now can I lean into that feeling and bring the compassion, the softness. And in that, now this points to an earlier point in our conversation when I was asking you, how do we tune into what's being communicated, right? I'm hungry, I'm actually hungry right now, I'm super excited for food, but like if I'm hungry, this is, random thoughts. That's my brain, wolfy brain. If I'm hungry, it communicates in the via of my belly. But in this moment, it's communicating, like I've spoken to you about, like that tenseness in my chest. If I'm compassionate with it, then I can decide, what do I need? You know what? I'm just going to lay down, hands on my chest, and just say, thank you for talking to me.
Mm.
Thank you for actually allowing me to feel, because there was a version of myself that felt nothing. And I would rather feel something than feel nothing,
Yes.
even if that something is uncomfortable.
Feelings are a sign that we are alive. You don't want to feel nothing. People kill themselves because they feel nothing. And as we were speaking to earlier in this conversation, everything is in relationship to something else, right? That is duality. Nothing can exist without the opposing thing also existing. So everybody wants happiness, but nobody wants sadness. Everybody wants love. Nobody wants fear. Everybody wants peace. No one wants anxiety, right? Everything is in relationship to itself, but there is no happiness without sadness. There is no light without dark. There is no order without chaos, right? This is why, like, there is the light and the dark, the sun and the moon, the God and the devil. These metaphors are in ancient scriptures and have been passed down for thousands of years in so many different ways, right? Higher self, shadow self, truth and delusion, all of it needs to happen. So what you're speaking to, the victim and the villain, or the victim and the villain, are both worthy of love. And I had this very powerful experience where I realized that they're not just both worthy of love, but they're the same. It's all God. God is the victim and the villain. And I had this very, very powerful experience earlier in my journey. I believe this was my third mushroom experience, where I had met my shadow coming up on the medicine. There was a shadow inside of me. I looked at that shadow. I thought it was a fucking demon. So I spent the next couple hours trying to run from it. And then I looked back at it and I'm like, oh, this is me. This is a part of me. And it was carrying
Hmm.
so much shame and self hatred and perfectionism and anxieties and worries. And I looked at it and I said, hey, you don't have to run anymore. I'm here and I love you. And I opened my arms and I gave it a hug, and it merged into me. And I started processing, and I started crying, and I started laughing, and I started to go through this. From the outside looking in, it probably looked like I was going crazy. I was going from like crying to pain, after to love to bliss. And then after I did my own processing of this spectrum of human emotions and understanding duality, I started to be taken, my consciousness was ripped out of my body and brought into terrorists and rapists and saints and murderers and presidents and corrupt politicians, X, Y, and Z. And the lesson of that story was, and that experience was, I couldn't leave the experience of being in the terrorist until I learned to have understanding and compassion for it. So I kept going through these experiences until I can have this unconditional compassion where I can think of Hitler and know that he was also worthy of love. That I can think of rapists and know that they're also worthy of love. And this is a very triggering conversation, right? This is going to trigger people. This is going to trigger people. This does not mean that what these people do is okay, but it does mean that they're also worthy of love, because we would not be able to have good without evil. It's all beautiful. It's all sacred. And in my eyes, this is what creates true freedom, is when we can integrate and recognize that the darkness and the evil that exists in everyone else in the world also exists inside of ourselves. Right? So being able to not to remember, to integrate those parts of ourselves through love and compassion, and realize that I am only capable of doing really good things because I'm also capable of doing really bad things, right? There is a part of me that is also very destructive, yet there at the same time, there is also a part of me that is very creative. There is a part of me that is very loving, but there is also a part of me that is very judgmental. And I get to create a relationship with all of it, of it's all okay and it's all sacred. And I exist in the gray area where I have the free will to choose. And that is where our power comes from. Because if you could only do good, if you could only love, would the love have any meaning? No, love has meaning because you have the choice to not love. Living a beautiful and powerful life only has meaning because we also have the possibility to live a terrible life and a destructive life. So again, it's all in relationship with one another. And just to share one more thing, Inside Out, this movie Inside Out, I freaking love this movie. I don't know if
I
you ever
love
seen
it.
it. But
I
what was
love it.
the whole time, what was Joy doing? The joy emotion was trying to keep
Trying to shut down
sadness.
sadness.
Yes. Sadness, you stay inside here. You're ruining everything, right? Stay inside here. But because sadness has sovereignty too and is also valid, she kept ruining things, ruining things. But there's this one scene where Bing Bong, the imaginary friend, his like toy that they made, him and Riley made together, was destroyed, and he started crying. And then Joy runs up to him, and then she's trying to make all these goofy faces, trying to be like, "Oh, just feel better, cheer up," and he's just staying sad. And then Sadness walks over, puts her hand on his lap, and says, "That's really sad. You and Riley must have had a lot of fun inside of that thing, and it's really sad that it's gone." And he's like, "Yeah," and they starts reminiscing on these stories and starts crying. Candy's coming out of his eyes, and then he's, "Okay, I'm all better now. We can go to the home base." Right? Because he felt validated, he was able to come back to joy because the sadness had purpose too. And that was the moment that Joy realized that sadness also had a purpose. So, what purpose does your pain have? Can you find purpose in your pain? Can you at least find peace and acceptance in your pain? Because there is so much wisdom that can be alchemized from our pain. There is so much purpose in our pain. There is so many gifts that are wanting to come through you and be shared with the world. But you can't get to them unless you go through the darkness. Let's look at any great story of anybody who has ever existed. They all had the hero's journey. They've all had breakdowns. They've all navigated trauma. So if we can recreate our worldview and our story about what trauma is trauma a bad thing or is trauma an opportunity? Ooh, no, triggering. But can trauma be a gift? In my eyes, it can. Because I look back at all of my traumas and realize they all happened not to me, but for me. And that is the mindset and the worldview that I choose to see life from. Because then I get to be free. Bring it the fuck on, life. Right? I know that I'm probably not done learning or growing. And I know there's going to be some breakdown in my future. And I get to walk into every day, like the Native Americans used to say, today is a good day to die. Today is a good day to die. Bring it on. But
Hoka
I want
hey.
people to be open to that if I don't see the opportunity in it. Even from a grander scale, maybe our souls came here to experience trauma in order for it to grow and evolve. Right? And this is where we get to have compassion for ourselves and turn on the healer and the alchemist inside of us that can start to look into these dark places that we have been avoiding, into these traumas, into these emotions, into these fears, and start to alchemize them into wisdom. We are so fucking powerful, but we will not be able to actualize our full potential if we are just focusing on the good.
Hmm. The one difference between a victim consciousness and a creator's consciousness is choice.
Yes. Yes.
If people are ready to begin alchemizing their darkness, their pain, their hurt into their remembrance, their wholeness, a deeper connection of love with themselves, how can people get connected to you?
Beautiful. Well, first, I would like to just speak to them for a moment and say that whatever you're going through is valid. Whatever you are navigating in life, whatever turmoil, whatever pain, whatever struggle, whatever breakdown is so valid. And it is okay. And that it is okay to not be okay. And the pain and the trauma may not be your fault, but how you move forward is your responsibility. This is where we move into the empowered approach to healing, where we are our own healers. And I just want to really invite and empower anyone who's listening to a simple practice to sit with yourself every single day, whether it's 1 minute or 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour, whatever you can do. If you can develop a devoted practice of sitting with yourself and just listening to what is present, you will start to get to know yourself. If you're in a relationship with someone else and you spend all your time with them scrolling on the phone and distracting yourself, you would not have a relationship with them. So start building that relationship. You don't need to go into your past and heal all these traumas, but just start to get to know yourself. Even if it's 1 minute a day, just taking 1 minute to breathe and just put a hand on the heart and say, hey, I'm here. Let's do our best today. Whatever comes up, I'm here for you. Even just that completely changes how you go about life. So I really want to just empower anyone listening, if you don't already, or if you have, but it's inconsistent, to really devote to that, to really devote to sitting with yourself and to being with yourself. And if you would like to find me, you can check me out on Instagram at It's Josh Rose, at ITSJOSHROSE. Most people get that wrong. And my website is transformationalmedicine.life. You can find my offerings. We do Kambo and breathwork ceremonies here in Florida with my beautiful wife in Orlando. So we have in-person offerings. We have our microdosing program, but we'd love to connect. So it's been such an honor to be on here, brother. Thank you for having me.
Check him out, people. Take a peek. He's got all the goods. And one final thing before we wrap, Josh. If you had to distill everything that we've spoken about today into one thing to take and walk away with, an idea, thought, what would be the one thing you want someone to be left with, or the version of yourself in the past who's struggling really deeply? What would be one thing?
Love yourself, bitch.
Retweet. That was so good. It got a choke out of me. Love yourself, bitch.
Let me get a little bit more serious. One thing, slow down, right? Like, slow down. We speak to this all the time. Like, and this is what I'm speaking to in creating this practice. Create a little bit of time in your day where you can slow down. I promise you, there is so much magic in that. Most of my healing and growth and joy in my life have not come from the things that I have put so much effort into, but the things I have just remembered through being, right? We came to this planet not to do. We came to exist and be and experience all of life. So slow down. You're exactly where you're meant to be. You are already enough. So remember that first and then take action from that place.
Thank you for taking a moment to slow down with me today, brother. Thank you for taking a moment to spread an unfathomable amount of love and compassion to myself, to everyone who's listening, and taking the time. It means a lot.
Thank you, brother. And thank you, everybody, for listening in.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hope you enjoyed. Love you so much. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode supported and inspired your journey to greater healing and feeling fully alive. If you haven't already, please subscribe and share this with someone you love. And in case you forgot, you are dope, you are loved, and you are enough. Thank you for existing. Peace.